I'm a poet, and poets love to work within different forms. You know, the sonnet, and the haiku, and the sestina, and the canto. The canto is a form that comes from Italy. The Latin word cento, C-E-N-T-O, everybody think means 100, but it has another meaning. That was back in the days before armor, before chain mail. The soldiers would stitch together pieces of leather to form a second skin over them. And this stitching together was what the cento was. Poets could not resist taking that idea and turning it into a poem in which they stitched together different lines of poetry from different sources and created a new poem. Sometimes it even can be 100 lines just to confuse people. So the canto is a form that I've used to bring together the poetries of the world. And now that I'm working with endangered languages, a way to keep alive the stuff that poetry is made from. I mean, poets have been using language for thousands of years, and now it's payback time. If the languages disappear, where are the poems? So an idea to bring attention to the global language crisis and to celebrate the diversity of languages is to create a canto, a poem stitched together with lines from different endangered or minority languages.
Atakdaf si ad, tlach as yatak.
Lito buna kalehne tike.
Namawi Rui, Namawi Tapatawi Ponan, Wanyil Namawi Tungara Tumbiwalan, Ngayambun.
The project began with my friend Steve Zeitlin, who's the producer, by wanting to be a book or a written poem. But it's clear that since most of these languages are not written down, they exist only orally. This is one of the marvelous things about this kind of language work, is that you get back to language before it was even written down. In these cultures where the language is spoken only, you are living in an oral time. Where is the book when you have an oral language? The person is a book. That's why it says, when an old person dies, a library is burned, because those stories all go in the oral tradition, except they're passed on, so they are always present. So the next thing we did was say, instead of writing this poem, we'd get an audio version, but soon thereafter we realized that video is the way to go. Film is the way to go. So to collect a line meant to get the poem on film. Or we could cheat a little bit and get an audio line and use a still photograph. You'll see that in this poem that we were originally going to be called The Endangered Language Canto, but somehow that didn't seem quite energized enough, and also didn't point to what the film or poem is about. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? That just as there was a shift in consciousness between orality and text, so now we are going through a shift in consciousness between text and digital. This is only the second time in the entire history of humanity that we've had this kind of shift in consciousness, where the actual means of communication is changing. The brain is evolving as we shift the way that we can touch each other without physically touching each other. The move, so to create a poem with the camera is a new way of learning how to write, how to make a poem. So this Khonsay is a poem. It just happens to exist as a film. Of course, it's written down also. I'll be right back. This is the cover for the DVD version, very antique version of Khonsay. That's Khonsay in the Devangari script of North India, where Khonsay in the Boro language means to pick something up with great care, which to Steve and me and the team that made the film seemed to be what we wanted to do with our poem. We wanted to show how with language you must pick them up with great care and attend to them. And so Khonsay, it's one of 15 different ways of saying love in the Boro language. That's a great way to love someone, to pick something up with great care. Inside is the poem. These are all words. The words in English and the words in the mother tongue are here. So the poem began by using every means possible to find the poems in as many languages as we could, and then to find within the poem a line that stood out and also would fit into this poem itself, the canto that I mentioned, that I was, whatever you would call that, accreting, putting together, or even writing.
Chamawit chanyu chalene nyu tung poare chalenyang to geliet kan jaman kan no bula ma bar bagan kan permenu kan ngajil kali mulo ko nang ada
Kosame Johtiko Piekanyuni ishateva tavas
So I was writing a poem out of filmed or spoken lines that would make sense as a poem. Does that make sense? I don't know, but that's what we did. And it resulted in a 15-minute poem in 50 different languages. I was by no means finished with the poem at that point, but it had been 9 years since we started. So Steve said, we have to stop somewhere. This seems like a good enough time to do that. At which point there was a contest in Native News from California, an Indian magazine out of California, that for the Native Language Challenge, people would send in their mother tongues, Native American languages, little squibs and they were so beautiful that I had to take a couple of them and find places for them. That was the art of it, right? Is finding how each of these languages can live together in a single poem. One poem, 50 different languages. So it is both a call to action that these languages need to be heard and survive, and also a celebration, because just to hear language after language, to let the ear dance with the different sounds of the different languages is a treat in itself, a journey, as we would like to talk about these days. So I hope you have a good trip with Khonsay. I didn't get into any of the individual lines, but let me tell you, each line is a story. You have the story of the line itself and the poem it comes from. You have the story of the poet who is speaking that line, and you have the story of the language as it exists and is trying to find a way to continue to exist under great assault. It's extraordinary that you can learn about this system of consciousness I was talking about, the shift in consciousness, by thinking that all of these languages survived the genocide of colonialism and managed to continue until now. But under the onslaught of digital, of a global language where everybody wants to be involved in the same conversation, what use is a tiny language spoken by 50 people, 1,000 people, 20,000 people? Languages are disappearing at a rate unheard of before. And that's why we have events like the Premio Ostana, and why Khonsay exists. And I'm beginning more and more to think why I exist is to let you know that each of these languages is a treasure. And if you want to find more about the languages in Khonsay, you can check the website and you can learn how the languages talk to each other as we are listening to a single poem. Khonsay.
Nan balla ko talla bage bazardan balla ko talla
እዚ ቋንቋና እዚ ትግርኛ ክጥዕም ጨው ኣለዎ ክልምልም
I do love this poem. I do love it, you know. A language builds no walls. It paints them in colors. You know, that's just one line. A language builds no walls. It paints them in colors. Wow.